Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we are going to share Dogman encounter horror stories. First story, my friend's encounter with a Dogman. A few months back, one of my friends opened up to me about a creature he said he encountered 2 times around New Jersey, where my mother lives. This same friend and I have encountered a skinwalker in the past while being in New Jersey, and he told me when he was just a boy he saw something in the fields next to his house. Whatever he saw still terrifies him to this day. He's had 2 encounters with this creature, one in the middle of the day when he was a boy, and one waking up in the middle of the night. Here are his encounters with an alleged Dogman. These stories are also from his perspective, so I could capture that narrative feel. I hope you enjoy his stories. Hi, my name is Ted, and I've lived in New Jersey all my life. Since I was a kid, I've had all sorts of paranormal and creature experiences for a long time, which I can also tell here in the future at some point. I'm a heavy believer in the supernatural and in Dogman and Cryptids, just like my friend Sam here. Here are 2 of my encounters with what I think are Dogmen. It was a clear sunny day as I was walking alongside a trail that was close to my house. I was only about 7 or 8 years old at the time. It was so beautiful out that day, and as a young kid, I was taking it all in. I was having an adventure, picturing myself just running through the open fields waiting for Mom and Dad to get home. The trail I was on had beautiful scenery all around, with tall grass and miles of fields to my left and dense forest to my right. I was just walking through the woods, as whenever my parents weren't home, that's what I used to do. I was enjoying the walk, taking in all the feels of nature. The smell of the woods was intoxicating as well as the chirping birds. Then the woods fell silent. I felt like someone or something was watching me, and my eyes darted around the entire area. I then looked to my left and noticed something in the tall grass. To me, it looked like a big dog, but then I saw it was crouched down like a man would be if he were hiding. It was covered in brown fur, looked like it had a muzzle and ears like a German shepherd, and had eyes that were blood red. I thought it was more curious than frightening to me, but I was still on edge. I was scared for a bit, but I acted like I didn't notice it and just went along my day and ran back to my house. I never spoke about this encounter with any of my family, as they would think I'm crazy, but that was my first encounter with what I think was a Dogman. The second encounter only happened about 4 to 5 years ago. At this point, I lived in a different house. This house was close to a large forest, and the biggest predators I've seen around here have been either coyotes or foxes. Now what I saw that night was no coyote. I woke up in the middle of the night with my throat dry and realized I was thirsty. I went to the kitchen to get some water when I felt a sudden sense of dread and felt like I was being watched. I looked into the window close to where I was, and to my horror, I saw this huge animal in my backyard. Whatever it was noticed me, and it was staring at me with these crimson red eyes. I felt utterly terrified, and to my horror, I saw the animal bare its teeth at me and stand up on 2 legs. This creature then started growling, and I could hear it as my window was opened slightly. I also saw its breath come out of its mouth, and I realized that this was a real animal. It looked to be about 7 to 8 foot tall on both legs, with the head of a German shepherd and a body shaped like a bodybuilder. Whatever it was then looked at the fence in my yard, ran to it, and jumped across it into the woods below. I went back to my bed, terrified and couldn't sleep at all that night. These 2 encounters with these beings have shook me to the core and made me realize that there are creatures that science refuses to recognize. That's not my dog. On this particular weekend, my parents flew out for a funeral of a family member. In hindsight, I probably should have come with them, but someone needed to watch the dog. Leia is a very hyperactive husky that doesn't really function well without any of us present, and we couldn't bring her with us, so I had to stay behind. We live in the middle of nowhere on a secluded road that leads into the woods. The next nearest house is roughly a mile away, which means Leia gets to stay outside for long periods of time, and that dog absolutely loves running around the forest. I've had to go out there and bring her back on numerous occasions simply because she loses track of time and won't return on her own. And don't get me started on the dead animals she brings back. I wish she wouldn't. It was a Saturday afternoon when I decided to go for a walk with Leia by my side. I often took walks through the forest to clear my mind, and not being able to attend a funeral was getting to me mentally. I called out to her inside of the house, and she was by my side not even 10 seconds later, panting and ready to go out. As soon as I opened the door, she bolted out at full speed, which made me grin. I love that dog to death. There's a hiking trail through the forest that I usually walk to not get lost, and Leia also knows to stay on track, and even if she doesn't, one quick call, and she's usually by my side within a minute again. I was just observing Leia, watching her run back and forth and roll around in the leaves occasionally. She was getting really dirty, and I knew I'd have to hose her down before I let her back into the house. The forest felt strangely eerie today. I was feeling uneasy, and I couldn't really pinpoint why. I chalked it up to just me feeling upset because of the funeral, but my stomach would not stop churning. Leia was really loud today, louder than usual. I could hear the leaves crunching even when she was completely out of sight, much further ahead than I was. Leia, I called out to her, and it echoed through the woods. I stopped to listen more closely. I could hear leaves crunching up ahead, and it was getting closer. Then I saw her emerge from behind a tree. The first thing I noticed was that she was no longer dirty, and then I noticed that she was dripping wet. I sighed. I had forgotten that we were near the river. I was too distracted. I usually turn back before we reach the river. She ran up to me. "Oh, Leia, now I'll need to give her a bath." She started shaking the water out and onto me, and then ran back off into the direction of the river. "Leia, come back." I called out again, but she was still running. This wasn't like her. I stood there completely and utterly confused. My bad gut feeling was only growing stronger. That's when I noticed something odd. The forest was eerily silent today. There were no birds chirping, no leaves rustling. Dead silence. I hadn't been paying too much attention to the nature itself. Just as I was about to call out for Leia again, I saw her shape bolting toward me again, with her tongue out. She was dirty again. I just turned around and beckoned for her to follow. We were going to head home. I couldn't stay here any longer. Something felt really off about the forest today. The walk back took around an hour. I hadn't realized we had gotten that far from home. Time flies by fast when you spend it inside of your head, thinking of your dead cousin and the happy memories you share together. Leia behaved during the walk back and didn't run off again, which saved me some trouble. I hosed her down when we got back to the house. I felt more comfortable now that I was finally home, but my gut feeling was still screaming at me that something was wrong. Had I missed something? I filled the dog bowl for Leia to eat dinner and then decided to lie down for a nap upstairs. I had a terrible headache. I woke up sometime later to a phone call from Mom. It was dark out now and raining. They had just gotten to my cousin's house and were ready to head to bed. We talked for a little bit, and I felt better after seeing them both. After some time, we ended the call, and I looked around my room, noticing Leia wasn't here. She usually made her way upstairs and slept at the foot of my bed if I was sleeping. I got up from bed and walked downstairs to see if I could find her. I could hear the rain pouring outside and some very distant thunder. Leia hated thunder. She might have been hiding under the dining table. I checked under it, but she wasn't there. I also checked over a dozen other places, and I couldn't find her. "Leia!" I yelled into the empty house. My heart was churning even worse than in the forest now. Something was terribly wrong. Just as I was about to yell again, I heard her footsteps behind me. I turned around and took a sigh of relief. She was right here. She came out of the direction of the living room. She looked all right. I kneeled beside her and gave her some pets. Good girl. As I was doing so, my ears picked up on a strange sound. I could hear scratching somewhere. I listened in. It was hard to discern through the pouring rain and thunder. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I stood up and began walking there. Leia followed behind me. Something was off. In the kitchen, the scratching was louder. It sounded like it was coming from outside. I had closed all the blinds earlier on all the windows and the back door, so I couldn't see outside. I slowly tiptoed to the back door, making sure to be silent as to not be heard, and I parted the blinds to look outside. My heart dropped. Leia was outside, scratching the door, asking to be let in. But Leia was right here. I turned around and looked at my dog. She was standing in the doorway, looking at me funny. If Leia is inside, then what's out there, scratching at the door? The dog outside howled, making me flinch. It sounded like Leia. I kept staring at Leia in the doorway while listening to the Leia outside, and something finally clicked in my mind. Something was wrong with her. She looked like Leia, but she also didn't. The proportions were all wrong. Her posture was unnatural, her slightly tilted head, the way she was looking at me. It wasn't Leia. The Leia outside started barking. My mind was running 1,000 miles a minute. Was this Leia, or was the one outside Leia? And more importantly, what was it that was imitating her? The Leia in the doorway finally moved. She began walking towards me. It looked so wrong. That's not how Leia walked. I turned around and started fumbling with the key to unlock the back door. The footsteps kept getting closer and closer. They started sounding heavier and heavier. I finally managed to unlock the door and Leia bolted inside, going straight for the other one. Except it didn't look like Leia anymore. It had doubled in size. Instead of paws, it had hooves. Instead of ears, it had horns, while still wearing Leia's hide and head. Nothing could have prepared me for that sight. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I ran past them both. Leia was barking at the monstrosity. I bolted upstairs and inside of my room. I locked the door behind me. My heart was beating out of my chest. I could hear the growling and barking downstairs. They were still having showdown. Leia and whatever. It was. Eventually it grew silent, and all I could hear was the rain and occasional thunder outside. Then I heard a faint sound. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but then it clicked. Something was scratching at my door. I couldn't be sure if it's Leia or not, so I kept the door closed and stayed quiet. Eventually the scratching grew silent. I haven't left my room yet, and it's the morning now. I called my parents, and they told I was being paranoid. I called the cops, and they thought it was a prank call. I don't feel safe, but I have to check the house. I'll be going to my parents' room and grabbing their gun before I clear the house and make sure it's gone. Third story, the DOGMAN of Vegreville. I was 6 years old when I saw the DOGMAN of Vegreville, and I will never, ever forget it. It was on a cool Thursday night in May of 1995. Mama told me to go to bed, but I wasn't tired yet. I'd snuck my Game Boy under the covers and was playing Mario with the volume off, thinking that I was oh so clever. Mom was probably already in bed, and Dad was working late, so he wouldn't be in to check on me anytime soon. I knew I could play to my heart's content, and I intended to do just that. My fingers moved clumsily over the buttons as I sent Mario to his death over and over again. I wasn't very good at the game, but it didn't matter. I loved it anyway. I didn't look up from the screen until I heard the distant pop of what sounded like fireworks. I remember that I peeked out of the covers. There was no flash of light outside my window, and while it was a beautiful night, there wasn't really any occasion to let off fireworks. All the same, I could still hear those frantic pops, one after the other. Bang, 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 bang. I'd never heard a gun go off before. In movies and on TV, yes, but never in real life. I never thought it would sound so much like fireworks. I set my Game Boy down to go and look out the window, half hoping to catch a glimpse of the show I thought was out there. As I looked out into the darkness, though, I saw nothing. Those fireworks had been very close by. I knew that much, but I couldn't see anyone who could have set them off. My house was in a small suburb that backed onto the woods, and my window faced the next-door neighbor's yard. I could see the lights on in their house, but nothing else. No one was in the yard. I noticed that the door to the back porch was open. No, not open. Shattered. Something had forced its way, and although I didn't quite connect the dots at the time, then I heard a scream. The terrified cry of a frightened woman that was cut off abruptly. That too was close by, and I could tell exactly where that was coming from. It had come from the neighbor's house. I stared at the house, trying to understand just what was going on. There were no other sounds, no other screams, just a pregnant silence. Outside my bedroom, I could hear my mom moving around. She must have heard the same things I had, and I could hear as she raced downstairs to investigate the commotion for herself. She hadn't even made it to the front door when I saw something emerge from the back of the next-door neighbor's house. It loped through the broken porch door, a scrawny, hairy thing that looked like no animal I'd ever seen before. I could see its pointed ears twitching on its head and its pointed wolfish snout. Its limbs seemed too long. It seemed to limp as if it was in pain, no doubt from the gunshot wounds it had suffered. Its head turned to look at me, and I saw two golden eyes shining in the darkness. They looked upwards and into my window, where I stared back at it. Whatever that creature was, it looked at me. It saw me. For a moment, our eyes remained locked. Time felt as if it stood still. Even from a distance, I know I saw something in its stare or in its face. But at the time, I couldn't put my finger on it. It was the creature that broke eye contact. It shook its head and shuffled away. Without ceremony, it took off into the woods. The darkness amongst the trees quickly swallowed it whole, and I lost sight of it. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. What happened next is a blur. I don't have any other clear memories from that night, nor do I remember much about what followed. I'm sure my mom did what she could to shelter me from it. I still found out the details anyways, because that's what happens in small towns. People talk and kids listen. While I may not remember what happened after my mom discovered the corpses of Nicholas and Ashley Burr, it was the talk of the town at the time, and every now and then, some people still whisper about it. Vegreville, British Columbia, is a small town with a population that barely tops 3,000 people. Gruesome murders aren't exactly common here, and so when one happens, you'd better believe that people are going to remember it. According to the rumors, some sort of animal broke into the Burr household that night. Most people claim it was a bear, but I've heard some people insist it was a puma. Either way, it woke up Nicholas Burr, and he took down his hunting rifle to kill it. He found it in his kitchen and shot it about 6 times before it attacked him, and it damn near ripped him in half. Ashley Burr was found upstairs. The creature had gone after her next and ripped her pretty little head clean off her shoulders and crushed it to a pulp. It was shortly afterwards that it ran off. Supposedly the commotion from concerned neighbors investigating the gunshot and Ashley's final scream spooked it, and it retreated off into the woods. Nobody actually got a good look at it. Nobody but me. Over time, I've taken to calling the creature the DOGMAN of Vegreville. Of course, nobody else in town ever actually believed I really saw what I saw. They all took my words as proof that it was a bear, and as I grew up, I learned that it was best not to talk about it. It's easy to forgive a child for claiming he saw something unnatural, but as one ages, that becomes a much less forgivable offense. I never once believed that I'd actually seen a bear that night, though. As I said before, I remember very clearly what I saw. I've seen it in my nightmares for 25 years now, and it sure as hell wasn't a bear. But like I said, I keep that to myself. I'm a grown man now, and I've got other concerns to worry about. I've got rent to pay, a job at the local auto shop to keep, and I've got my mom to take care of. A few months after the Burr incident, my dad's car broke down on the side of a highway while he was on his way home from work one night. He must have been trying to flag down a passing car for help, although the poor bastard whose attention he got didn't notice him until after he'd felt the bump of his body beneath his tires. Dad died instantly, and my mom was never quite the same afterwards. Grief leaves scars on a person that never fully heal, and I had to learn to step up as the man of the house pretty damn quickly after that. I don't believe I've mentioned the DOGMAN of Vegreville to my mom in a long while. She's got enough on her plate without hearing about my little side project. As age creeps up on her, her health has begun to fail even more. I haven't felt comfortable leaving her by herself. Sickness has left her unable to work, so I handle the bills. She does some of the cooking, but that's really just about it. I'd hate to push her too hard, especially when she's in such a frail state. A few months back, she had her second stroke, and it's been a slow recovery process ever since. I do what I can for her, I really do. But no matter how much I want, I can't fix her. I can't take away the things that are eating her away, and bringing up my research into a local cryptid that I tied to what I know to have been a traumatic incident to her wouldn't do her any favors. It's best left off the table with her, but just because I don't discuss it doesn't mean I haven't put the work in. As I've said, I know what I saw that night, and I've been aiming to prove it for some time now. Throughout the years, I researched other attacks in the area. Vegreville only had the one, but I've found reports of similar incidents in the surrounding towns. There were a few of them in the late 80s and early 90s. The attacks all played out similarly enough. Some unknown animal, suspected to be a bear or puma, forced entry into a house and butchered the occupants. Tragic as it was, it got chalked up to a simple animal attack, and that was it. You don't often hear of animals forcing entry into houses. Sure, if you look online, you'll find funny videos of bears breaking open cabin doors and poking around looking for food. However, those cabins aren't occupied when it happens. I've seen my fair share of bears. They aren't keen on people and generally avoid them when at all possible. Vegreville is a pretty remote place, but it's still far too heavily populated for most bears to want to get too close. Sometimes you might hear about them rummaging through trash or poking around people's yards. I'm sure there have even been a few instances where curious bears broke into houses, looking for food. Attacks are rare, however, and when they do happen, they generally involve cubs. People don't care about that, though. There's an image of the bear as this demon of the forest, a violent monster who loves nothing more than to rip into fresh meat. People assume that just because they have the ability to easily kill a person, then they're inclined to do so. Supposedly, 3 bears were killed in response to the attacks. One in 88, another in 92, and one in 96. The one that died in 96 was a large female grizzly who had attacked a pair of hikers in the next county over. Since the attacks seemed to stop after that, people figured that was the end of it, and I got to admit, part of me wondered if that really was the case for the longest time. But then the attacks started up again. I saw them on local news stations. The same story as before. Forced entry into a house and the total slaughter of its occupants. I knew it was that same creature. I could feel in my bones, and I knew this was my one shot at proving what I'd seen all those years ago. I had no intention of wasting it. The most recent attack occurred in a town called Weston, a few kilometers north of Vegreville. I'd heard about it in the paper, and the next day, I figured I might as well head up to investigate. At worst, I'd waste a day in another town. At best, maybe I might find myself one step closer to understanding just what it was I saw that night. What I knew going in was that Elsa and Janelle Harris were sisters. Janelle was blind, and Elsa took care of her. One night, something had attacked Elsa while she was in her backyard. Janelle had heard the attack, along with the neighbors, and had gone to the door to call for her. Instead, she'd attracted the attention of whatever animal had killed her sister, and it had dragged her off into the woods. Police had found most of her body the next day. Most of it. The Harris house was in a quiet neighborhood, just like my own. I could see the forest behind the houses, though. The map said that it wasn't a particularly large stretch of woods. It was little more than a ravine with a small creek that separated the houses from a nearby park. However, it connected with a larger area of the woods. It made for a perfect little place for man and nature to intersect. The house itself was still sectioned off with police tape. I didn't see anyone to stop me from going inside, but I didn't want to push my luck either. Why try it, right? I parked my car across the street and got out. Even if I wasn't going to go inside the house, maybe there were still clues to be found. The houses in that area didn't have fences. Weston was still fairly rural, all things considered. I could get into the backyard easily enough. The vast forest started at the end of the yard and stretched infinitely deep into it. As I walked past the trees, I was quickly swallowed up by the darkness of the canopy. Just what I was expecting to find, I really can't say. I kept my eyes on the dirt in front of me as I circled around to the backyard. Through the trees, I could see the yellow police tape, isolating the crime scene that was formerly the Harris's backyard. I didn't go too deep into the woods. It was better not to wander out too deep, or else I'd probably have trouble finding my way back. The area around me was oddly quiet. I could hear a few distant birds and some trickling water, but not much else. Slowly, I approached the water, a small creek that ran over some smooth rocks. I didn't cross the creek. No need to go that far. But I stayed on the edge of it and looked out at the space around me. If the dogman really was the one responsible for this, it would no doubt be long gone. I suppose that was a good thing. I had no interest in meeting that thing face to face. As I stood by the creek, my eyes shifted downwards. I'd been half hoping to see something. A footprint. A bit of fur. Hell, maybe even some evidence that Janelle Harris had been dragged that way. I suppose I was my lucky day then. It was faint and easy to miss or mistake for something else. What I say was barely evidence, and yet I saw it all the same. The soil around the creek was wet and muddy. One small segment had grooves in it that indicated something had been dragged that way. A few stones were overturned and had been pulled out of the creek. I paused at the sight of them before I noticed what was right beside those drag marks. A paw print. There was only one. It had landed in the right place at the right time and sank deep into the drying mud. It wasn't even a complete paw print, just a few canine pads that looked only slightly larger than my hand, and yet looking at them gave me pause. I crouched down by the stream, wide-eyed as I studied the indentation in the mud. This was the closest thing I'd gotten to proof since that night 25 years ago, and I immediately took out my phone to grab a picture. "You lost, sir," a voice said from behind me as soon as the shutter snapped, and I looked back. A man stood a few feet away from me. He was older, somewhere in his 50s, and dressed in flannel. "No," I said hastily as I stood up, "sorry. I was just looking at some tracks." He studied me for a moment before nodding. "You with the police?" he asked. "Not exactly," I replied, "just doing some research. It's something of a hobby. What happened to the Harris girls, it's really tragic. But it reminds me a bit of some attacks that happened about 25 years back. I was just wondering if maybe there was a connection or something." "A connection?" the other man asked before scoffing. "That your car on the street, by the by? The red Corolla?" "Yeah, that's mine." I said. "You must be new in town then. You living in this area?" "Excuse me. I saw your car the other day. It was your car, right?" His brow furrowed. "I don't think so," I said. "I've never been out here before. I'm just here to look into the killings." The man raised an eyebrow. "That's all, huh? My mistake then. You said you found tracks." I nodded before stepping aside to show them to my new companion. He kept his distance from me as he drew nearer and looked down at the indents in the mud. He studied them for a moment before looking back at me. "Well, that's interesting. I don't suppose you heard what the police had to say on what happened here, did you? Bear attack, right?" I asked. He nodded. "They did indeed. You mentioned other attacks in this area 20, 30 years back, didn't you?" "I remember those. I suppose this does fit the bill. You ever hear of a man named Tyler Fox?" The name wasn't familiar. "No, sir," I replied. "Well, I was barely even your age when those attacks happened last, so my memory isn't great. If I recall, folks chalked that up to a bear as well. Fox had some other ideas, though. I remember he was working with the police, taking pictures of prints. If I remember, those prints looked a lot like this. If you snapped any pictures, it might be smart to bring them to him. Chances are he might know something." I'll look down at the paw prints once more before looking back at the man. "Tyler Fox, you said?" I felt something brimming in my chest. Hope or elation, perhaps. If there was evidence from the attacks 25 years ago, maybe it would tell me more about what had been out there back then. Maybe it would tell me more about what was out there now. Where would I find him exactly? I asked, and I barely hid the excitement in my voice as I did. The neighbor gave me an address about 15 minutes away and a phone number to call. Tyler Fox picked up on the second ring, and when I told him I'd found some footprints, he seemed pretty eager to meet. His chosen meeting place was a small diner out on the edge of town. A little greasy spoon, the likes of which you'd probably find just about anywhere, and either serve the worst food in the world or the best. No in between. Fox was a man who was right on the edge of 60 with frazzled gray hair and serious eyes behind big, studious glasses. He was waiting for me when I arrived, and I could see his impatience in the way he anxiously drummed his fingers. "Mr. Fox," I asked timidly, His gaze locked onto me, so fast I was sure he was about to attack. Yes, that would be me, he said hastily. You're the one who called about the paw prints, right? Out behind the Harris house. Yes, sir. I found them just this morning. Well, sit down. Sit. Let me buy you a drink. I assume you've got the pictures. Right here, sir. I offered him my phone, and he snatched it out of my hand to study the pictures on the screen. He was silent for a few moments, and a waitress happened by to ask us for our drink orders. Fox had a beer. I opted for soda. A man I spoke to, one of the Harris sisters' neighbors, mentioned you'd looked into the attacks a few years back. I said once the waitress was out of earshot. You had some ideas as to what might be causing them. I did, Fox said, his voice distant. He was barely listening to me. After a moment, he set my phone on the table and pushed it back towards me. The cops back then were quick to chalk the attacks up to a bear. Could be that they were right, although I always thought the tracks looked off. Well, those tracks in the picture. I'm no expert, but I don't think those were bear tracks. They could be, he said. The two main theories I've heard floated around are either bears or wolves were responsible for the attacks. Bears have 5 digits on their paws, just like the tracks you showed me, and the size looks just about right. However, if that is a bear, I'll be very surprised. Why is that? I asked. The palm of the tracks. They've got the right amount of digits, but the palm is too wide. Like a man's palm. He raised one hand and curled his fingers inward a little bit to make a claw. Only much bigger. You say you found this out behind the Harris house, right? You swear it. Yeah, I swear it. I said. Fox huffed. I didn't know if he believed me or not. These look exactly like the tracks I found a few years back. Exactly. Off the top of my head, I'd say this was the same animal. As for what exactly that animal is, well, hell if I know. I take it you're looking into all this if you were poking around the Harris house. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. That's right. Well, good luck to you. I dug through this shit all those years ago. I never figured out what was really behind those attacks. If you're digging into this, I can send you some of my old photographs and whatnot. I'm a little too old to be trudging about the woods these days. But it might be there's something in there that can help you. Please, I said. I could pick them up today if you're offering. Eager, huh? If you insist. Can't say I have much better to do. Fox said with a shrug. He took a long sip of his beer. I'll buy you lunch first, though. Hell, least I can do for the kid who's taking up the torch, right? I'd appreciate that, Mr. Fox. Yeah, you'd better, he chuckled humorlessly before taking another sip. What do you suppose it is? I asked. I know you said you didn't know for sure, but I don't know. What do you think is out there? Like I said, hell if I know. He repeated, if I had to guess. Subspecies of something. Bear, wolf. I don't know. The woods out here are thick and deep. I've heard people talk of Sasquatch, monsters, demons, and all sorts of strange things. I've never fully bought into all of it. I always figured there was a rational explanation, and that's honestly the best I can come up with. He shrugged. For all I know, it really is Bigfoot out there. Either way, it's killing those people, and clearly it's back. The waitress who'd brought us our drinks returned with a friendly smile and a charming greeting of, have you boys decided what you'd like to eat? Yeah, I'll go with the Salisbury steak. Fox said without even looking at the menu, and the waitress looked expectantly at me. I hadn't had a chance to go through the menu either, and with the way her eyes lit up with recognition, I didn't get a chance either. Oh, it's you, she said, half surprised and half relieved. She said it as if we'd met before, although I was sure I'd never seen that woman before in my life. You look a lot better today, don't you? Excuse me, I asked. Oh, don't you remember? You were pretty out of it. It was, a few days back? You were on the side of the road. We gave you a ride. I stared at her, unsure just what the hell she was saying, and yet her smile held a sincerity to it that was difficult to argue. You don't remember? She repeated. Sorry, ma'am. I'm afraid you have the wrong person, I said quietly. Fox was looking at me expectantly, one eyebrow raised, and I saw a dejected look cross the waitress's face. She was probably wondering if she'd either really got it wrong, or if I was trying to save face, and she'd embarrassed me. Oh, well, maybe I do, she said quietly. I'm sorry. That must have been my mistake. Sorry about that. No worries, I assured her and forced an uncomfortable smile. I guess I've just got one of those faces. I guess you do, she repeated, trailing off slightly before taking a step back. She offered a sheepish smile and left without even taking my order. Another waitress conveniently came along to take it after I'd had a chance to look at the menu. Fox never asked me about what she'd said. I suppose he took it at face value and opted to stay out of it either way. I was grateful for that much. When I left Weston, I had an old box filled with old photographs of paw prints in mud. Fox had been generous in what he'd given me, and I couldn't get home to pore over it all fast enough. I'd stumbled upon the motherlode of DOGMAN evidence. Not enough to truly convince anyone, no. It would take a hell of a lot of proof to ever really be enough. But it was enough for me. I faked sick and took the next day off work just to pore over the photographs and files. Fox had just about everything, including detailed reports of every suspected encounter with whatever creature he thought was behind this. In a 100-kilometer radius of Vegreville, I counted about 12 different supposed attacks from 1990 to 1996, including the Burr family. There were photographs and even one or two plasters of footprints taken from the scene, but not much in regards to eyewitnesses. Nobody had clearly seen what had attacked those people, and the best information I could find was people describing it as an animal fleeing the scene. It was more information than I'd ever had access to, but nothing definitive. At least the pictures of the prints were enough for me to compare to the pictures I'd taken. Fox had been right when he'd said they'd been similar. However, looking at them side by side, I couldn't help but feel as if the one I'd found was smaller than the one Fox had photographed. I suppose it made some sense. After all, after so many years, it probably wasn't the exact same creature, right? This one could be a juvenile. Maybe even the offspring of whatever had begun the attacks, which posed a question. What had triggered the attacks this time? Why had they stopped? Where are they starting again? I saw no real answers. Nothing to explain why any of this was happening, and that question hung uncomfortably over me. It was only a few days later that I heard news of another attack. My digging into what Fox had given me hadn't led me to any shocking new revelations. However, I knew I couldn't turn down the chance to look into another attack. So recent, too. I remember waking up that morning and coming downstairs to see the news on the TV. Mom was watching it intently, dead silent as she did. I remember her eyes fixated me for a moment, studying me more intently than normal. I offered her a comforting smile as I went over to join her. "Did you eat yet?" I asked. "I can make some breakfast if you haven't." No, I'm fine," she rasped and looked back at the TV. She didn't comment on what she was watching, but she didn't need to. I could see the recognition in her eyes as the anchor recounted the same story I'd heard before. Something had entered the house of someone in Vegreville. It had left no survivors. Once I was sure that Mom would be okay on her own for a few hours, I headed out to the neighborhood where the attack had happened. I kept my distance, of course, and parked my car just down the street. I could see flashing police sirens and yellow tape blocking the area off. No way I was going to get close to it, and I wasn't quite interested in trying my luck. I could see a few neighbors speaking to the officers and dared to let myself creep closer. Maybe if I couldn't go in, I could at least ask a few questions. One of the cops looked up at me as I drew nearer. He'd been talking to one of the neighbors, a middle-aged man I'd seen around town from time to time. He stared at me as if I was a ghost. I just chalked it up to shock. "Morning, officer," I said calmly and casually as I could. "What happened here? I'm not at liberty to discuss that." The officer said, his tone stern. He looked me up and down, his brow furrowing. "I've been asked not to let people linger around crime scene. Best you go home. Let us do our work." Of course. "Sorry," I said, faking a smile. I could see the neighbor he'd been talking to still staring at me, brow furrowed in what looked to be anger. The man looked at the officer, then back to me. Our eyes met for a moment before he spoke. "You? I saw you last night." The officer paused and looked over at the man. He drew closer to me. "I remember the car. I remember you. You're the one I saw heading into their backyard." "Excuse me." I asked. Going into these people's backyard? Was this guy crazy? No, no, it was you. The man insisted. He looked at the officer now. That's the guy I was talking about. That's the guy I saw going into the backyard. He'd started raising his voice, and the commotion had drawn another officer. I took a step back, and as the man kept shouting, time seemed to become a blur. Okay, sir, were you present here last night? I remember the officer asking. No, I said. No, I don't usually go down this street. I was home all last night. You could ask my mom. I saw you, asshole. Don't you dare lie. The neighbors spat. I saw your shit-ass car on the street, and I saw you going into their backyard. I saw it, and I got it on my porch camera. It wasn't me. I cried. I wasn't here last night. I can prove it. The man was in my face then, eyes locked to mine, and screaming. I remember the officer stepping between us, although his posture suggested he was trying to protect the man screaming at me rather than the other way around. In my peripheral vision, I saw two other officers watching me. They seemed too close for comfort. Sir, would you mind coming down to the station? He asked. His voice indicated that I didn't have much of a choice. We just want to ask you a few questions. My mouth suddenly felt dry. I could feel my pulse racing, but I still forced myself to say yes. I'd been at home all night. There was no way it was me that man had seen last night, was there? At the station, I watched the footage of my own car parking on the street outside what I now knew to be the home of Leon and Taylor Baker, along with their two sons. I could see myself clearly on that footage walking into their backyard. Not a man who looked like me. Me. And I couldn't come up with a single reason why I'd been on that film to the stony-faced detective I'd been in the room with. All I could do was sputter incompetently as he sighed and place me under arrest. As I was led to a holding cell, I felt like I was in a dream state, ready to wake up at any second. What was happening didn't feel like reality anymore. I felt like I was drifting through something strange and incomprehensible. As I laid down on the cot they provided me, listening to drunkards in the next tank over, my heart was still pounding. My blood was racing so loud I could feel it in my ears. I don't remember falling asleep. I'm not sure if I really did fall asleep. I woke up at home about an hour ago. I don't know how much time I've got. I've seen the news about the police station. Apparently, someone recently escaped one of the holding cells and left 8 officers dead in their wake. That someone wasn't named. And yet the way my mom looked at me when I came downstairs said enough. Her lips were sealed tight and silent tears streamed down her cheeks as I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the TV. I looked over at her and watched as she continued to cry. "I'm sorry," was all she managed to say. "I thought you'd be different than your father. I thought that when he died, this would all be over. I know you didn't mean to do any of it. I know that. He didn't either. It's just that work could be so stressful for him, and when the stress came, it came out." I stared quietly at her, watching her bury her head in her hands. My whole body was trembling. I asked her, "The wolf in him. It's in you too. He never could control it. Oh God, God, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't think you'd believe it was you. I didn't know what to do. Her final words were cut off in empty sobs, and I quietly withdrew back up the stairs. I don't know if I fully understand what's been happening to me. I realize now that there are gaps in my memory. Things I did that I can't remember. Things I don't think I want to remember. I can hear the police sirens getting closer. I know I don't have much time. I'll try and go peacefully, but I don't know if whatever is in me, whatever was in control during those hours I can't remember, will go without a fight. I think I'm going to die soon. I don't know. I don't know much anymore, but there's one thing I'm sure of. I think I found the DOGMAN of Vegreville. 4th story. My dog and I found a demon in the Arizonan desert. The Superstition Mountains, to be exact, which, around here, are just called the Superstitions. They stick up from the dirt and dust like a dragon's back molar. Thick, otherworldly, sinister. There are stories about this place, legends of lost Dutchmen, and lore of hidden gold. And many people have spent a good deal of time out here digging and climbing and spelunking, try to find it, claim it. Me being one of them. Now, I've been up to superstitions a couple times before, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, but the day I discovered the demon, I was with my dog, Charles. We were like all those who came before us, looking for the lost Dutchman's gold mine, a place said to hold all the riches you could ever want. And though I thought it was just a silly tale, a reason to get my ass off the couch and out hiking, in a way, and secretly I wanted it. And I wanted it bad. That day, Charles and I were out there from dusk till dawn, surveying the land, hiking around the peaks and the crags, feasting on ill-made sandwiches and the scraps, looking for something unusual and peculiar and shiny. It was nearing full dark when we found it. A small red blip in the rocks, a door. It was rusted reddish, corroded like it was sick and was rotting from the inside out. I walked towards it, puzzled and intrigued. Beside me, Charles panted and watched me with deep trust. There was something about it, and it piqued my curiosity. And for some reason indeterminable by me, I just had to know what was inside. As I got closer to it, I realized there was a large angular key sticking out from the exact middle of it, almost like someone had opened it and, in their excitement, left it there. I reached out tentatively, not knowing what would happen. The door was hot to the touch, almost scalding. I bumped it with the tips of my fingers, and it swung open slightly, revealing an impenetrable darkness beyond and the faint smell of lilac. I looked back at Charles, who was standing behind me, watching me. He met my gaze and wagged his tail. "Come on," I said, deciding then and there that this had to be it. This had to be where all that gold was hidden. And I found it. We found it. Charles was going to get a big steak tonight. Using a rock, I bumped the door more open and clambered inside, Charles close on my heels. After a moment's thought, I reached out and grabbed the key. It was surprisingly cold, and I pocketed it. Almost immediately, the door slammed shut like someone had pulled it closed. Someone angry. There was a singular hissing noise, the kind steam might make if let out of a hole too small. And then, just like that, we were enclosed in complete darkness. Charles started growling, low and insistent. Spooked, I flicked my headlamp on and swung it around the space. We were in a small cave of some sort with what looked like a rather large tunnel, leading down into the darkness. There were rows and rows of stalagmites and stalactites sticking out from the cave around us. They looked like bared teeth. From around one of the large stalagmites, or stalactite, I can never tell the difference, a human leg popped in and out of view. It looked small, maybe a woman's or teen's leg, and it was wearing a bright yellow high top covered in blue flowers. Peonies maybe. Hello. The voice sounded different, like none I had ever heard before. Like a man and a woman speaking at the same time, but in harmony. High-pitched and excited. So damn excited. Hello. Hello. I know your name. I'm not telling you my real name. Do you want to know how? My heart pounded its way up and into my mouth, choking me, making it hard to speak. Who are you? There was a pause, and in that moment, the steady stream of Charles's low growl overtook the space. Oh, no, dog. The voice paused, then spoke again, its voice dropping in pitch faster than my stomach. I think you should run now. Not wanting to take my eyes away from the foot, I felt behind me with my hands, trying to find the borders of the rusted red door. But I couldn't. Finally, I turned and saw that it was gone. The damn thing had disappeared. A sick laughter boiled up from behind me, pouring over me, drenching me with fear. Beside me, Charles started barking aloud, mad bark. Fully panicked now, I turned and focused on the only opening I could see, that long, dark, perfectly carved tunnel. It went down into the darkness beyond. Come on, Char. We took off. And as we ran, the laughter never got farther away, but stayed right there behind us, as if it was coming out of the goddamn walls themselves. The tunnel went all the way down into an enormous room with high, angular walls. It was so big I couldn't see where anything ended. Charles and I rounded the corner, and my heart stopped. Voices, male and female, echoed up to me from the rear of the room. Then, as I watched, two people appeared out of the darkness before I even had time to react. I stood there, Charles by my side, out in the open until they noticed me. They were talking about something. In retrospect, the guy was saying, I still think I should have apologized about the dog. Shit way to die. Guy is probably still in shock. Yeah, the girl interrupted, but you saved his life. And cleaned up. And that's what matters, not the, who are you? They both stopped short, seeing me standing in the middle of the tunnel. And it's what they were wearing that made me hesitate more than anything else. The guy was decked out in, and I mean this in the most literal way possible, full tactical gear, complete with some sort of night vision goggles / gas mask combination. He was also, inexplicably, holding a broken guitar. The girl, who looked to be in her 20s, maybe older or younger, was wearing a ratty, muddy bosom shirt, ripped shorts, and green flip-flops. I looked between them, not knowing what to say. Instead, Charles took a tentative step forward and made the first comment, a small woofing sound, curious and yet surprisingly blunt. He was looking directly at the girl. What you on about? She looked directly back at Charles. The guy and I looked between them for a moment, me confused, he amused, and then the guy looked up at me and said, No, seriously, how the hell did you get in here? How are you alive? His voice was slightly muffled by the mask. I gaped at them before finding my voice and telling them, honestly, there was a door and a key, a weird cold black one. I have it here. I slid it from my pocket and showed them briefly. The guy in the gas mask didn't respond, but instead looked down at the girl who looked back up and shot him a guilty grin. He shook his head and looked back at me. And you're okay? Yeah, I said. But alive? What did you mean by that? The girl, who had turned her attention back to Charles, laughed and said, What? Did you not see that large reptilian on your way down? Have you not heard the legends, what they say about this place? Reptilian? The guy looked over at the girl, then back at me and pushed his goggles / mask up on his head so I could see his eyes, his face. She means demon. Oh, demon. I laughed. What? Isn't this just the lost Dutchman's mine? You guys are just searching for the treasure and decided to play a spooky little trick on me, right? It was the guy's turn to laugh, and he did heartily. Oh man, are you in for one hell of a shock? Turn around, but do it slowly, like your life depended on it. A freakish, low laughter shook the walls of the cave, and I turned around, slowly, just like the guy told me to do. At first, I didn't see anything, but as my eyes adjusted to the light, I saw it. There, just by the shadows of an oddly shaped boulder, a foot. The same foot, wearing that same yellow shoe. Except the peonies were red now. Bright red. It did a little jig. I turned back to look at the man, my eyes wide in shock and disbelief. He just looked back at me with an I know, right? expression, then cleared his throat and said, "What are you most afraid of, bud?" "What?" "That's a weird thing to ask someone." "Fair," he replied, "but just tell me, so we're ready." He gestured to the girl and himself. The girl, though, she just shook her head and muttered, "Yeah, no. Just him. What am I most scared of?" "Yep. I don't know. Crushing debt." Just got a small, quick burst of laughter from the guy. No, he said, still smiling. "Like your nightmares." "Were they made of?" The girl scoffed and rolled her eyes at the guy beside her. "That's a stupid way of asking that question, bud." And she looked at me. "Ever read IT? By Stephen the King of Horror?" "Tried, but that book is long." "Yeah, but imagine that." "What?" "What?" The guy cleared his throat, obviously wanting to help. "Wasn't there the same thing in that book with that wizard boy Messiah?" It was the girl's turn to laugh. "Harry Potter. And yeah, the Boggart. But where do you think she got the idea from, huh?" The guy shrugged, looked at her straight-faced, then said with sarcasm, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe they both got it from all that demonology and lore and mythology shit we just spent hours reading. Because, it's a basic human archetype of fear itself." The girl made an angry, sort of growling noise at the guy, then turned back to me and said, "It's a goddamn thing that changes into whatever you fear most. Aliens, reptilians, deadites, Nazis, giant bugs, werewolves, that kind of shit. I guess you could call it demon. Werewolves, eh." The guy smirked at the girl who rolled her eyes. "Hey, She said to him, "Shut up." While they were talking, and I was watching them, totally bemused, none of us had noticed Charles creepy ever so tentatively towards the foot. He must have been hypnotized or something, because that dog never leaves my side. A small yelping sound burst out behind us, and we all turned at the same moment to see a hideous creature crouched on all fours with Charles pinned beneath it. And yeah, okay, if I had to pick a thing, I would say that thing, that slimy and scaly dead thing, with rotten skin and yellowed pointed teeth, and that weird-ass jerking stop-motion movement, wearing the same outfit my ex wore when I saw her last. That thing was the thing I was scared of most. No, the guy bellowed, dropping the broken guitar and pulling out the biggest handgun I have ever seen. Not another goddamn dog. "You'd better cover your ears," the girl said. "And eyes," she added as an afterthought. And the guy, without so much as 2 seconds of time to aim, blasted that gun right at that thing. The flash from the tip of the barrel was blindingly bright, too bright. And the subsequent boom was heart and head shatteringly loud. The bullet hit the thing in the shoulder and blew off a large portion of it, splattering the wall behind it black with goo. It screamed and transformed. I thought it might turn into the reptilian the girl had mentioned, but it didn't. Instead, it turned into another man. A normal-looking guy. He wore a white shirt, blue jeans, and cowboy boots. And, despite the wound on his shoulder, he stooped and picked up Charles, holding him high, blocking his face with his body. Charles growled and snapped and whimpered. Next to me, the girl made a shocked face and looked between the man in the cowboy boots and the guy with the gun. Well, shit. The guy was still aiming at the thing, but was hesitant to fire, clearly not wanting to hit Charles. He was also very clearly ignoring the girl's reaction, too. She looked back from the guy to the man in the cowboy boots and seemed to decide something. She opened her mouth and started to sing. I had visions. I was in them / I was looking into the mirror / to see a little bit clearer / rottenness and evil in me. A look of sheer disbelief crossed the guy's face, and he chanced to glance back at the girl. Really? Of all songs? That's the one. That's the one you choose. She just smiled and kept singing. The guy looked over at me grinning and lowered his gun, but only slightly. "See," he said over the voice of the singing girl, glancing between me and that monster. "Music. Any kind of music controls it. You don't necessarily have to play an instrument or even be that good." The girl shot him a glare, still singing, but as long as there's some beat to it, well, he gestured at the demon with his head. I looked over at it and laughed. I couldn't help it. The creature, it was just swaying and swaying to her singing, no matter how off-key and warbling it was. It had transformed again from the man to a large, reptilian. 7 feet tall, with shiny blue-green scales and yellow diamond-shaped eyes. It twirled suddenly, dropping Charles in the process. He yelped and scrambled over to me, limping. There was a large gash on his left flank, and it was gushing blood. "Here," the guy said, kneeling down and placing his gun on the ground. "I can stop the bleeding, hold him." He pulled some sort of liquid bandage out of his vest and swiftly, but precisely stemmed the flow of blood from Charles's leg. I thanked him, then looked back up at the girl, and that thing, slightly afraid but more amused. She was still singing, but she was doing something else now. Dancing, right up next to the reptilian, who was now wearing a cowboy hat and a ridiculously campy grin. "Dancing with your demons, eh?" She nodded, still singing. I looked over to the guy. "Kinda poetic, huh?" "Kinda," he said, patting Charles on the head and standing up. "Now stay put. We're gonna go put this asshole back where it belongs." They left, the singing girl leading the way, the dancing reptilian following, and the guy, gas mask / goggles back on, bringing up the rear with his gun trained on it. They returned about 15 minutes later and escorted me back to the cave I had entered from. The door was still gone, and we stood there for nearly a full minute before the guy reached forward towards me and said, "Key." Whoa. I reached into my pocket, pulled the key out, and handed it to him. He flipped his goggles down and surveyed the walls around us for a moment. Suddenly, he strode forward and stuck the key straight into the bedrock and turned it. There was a resounding click, and slowly, the rusted red door reappeared like it had been there the whole time, and some trick of the light or the way it was built into the rock prevented me from seeing it. But the door, I said in complete disbelief, it disappeared. Yeah, the guy said. It tends to do that when it's locked. But this bad boy here, he wiggled the key at me. It tends to, light it up. He tapped his goggles, then turned and swung the door open to a sweet, sweet rush of fresh air. And just like that, we were out. Between us, the guy, and I got Charles down the mountain, while the girl trailed behind, humming snatches of that song every so often. We stopped near one of the trailheads, where 3 cars were parked. The moon was high in the sky, and there was a slight, cool breeze blowing in from the west. Above us, the stars twinkled mischievously, like they knew deep, dark secrets they were just bursting to spill. I was still carrying Charles, who was whimpering slightly, and the guy glanced sideways at him with a look of what can only be described as concern on his face. He turned to me, digging for something in one of the front pockets of his black vest. Here, he said finally, pulling out a wad of paper. Get him looked at, he nodded at Charles. Let me pay for it. He handed the wad of paper to me, and I looked down at it, seeing immediately that it was at least 2 dozen $50 bills. I looked back up at him and said, Really? It's just money. Get yourself something too. Try to forget about that. He gestured to the rusted metal door with his head. The girl looked over at him imploringly. Oh, can I have some money too? He laughed in the girl's face and said, Shut up. Then looked back at me. Forget about this place, okay? Don't tell anyone about it. Or about us. They might come out here looking for answers. It's not safe. And we wouldn't want anyone getting all the way, down there. He paused, thoughtful, then added, I mean it. Then, to the girl, he said, Come on. And they turned towards the black car. I watched them for a few seconds before yelling, Wait, what exactly is down there? The girl huffed and climbed into the passenger seat. But the guy, while he turned back, grinned widely and said something with a small wink. And it was the way he said it, all of it, playfully enticing, like what he really wanted was for people to go out and explore and find out the truth for themselves. It was how he said it that made me decide to write this all down and share it with you all. I think it's what he really wanted. What did he say? He said, Why the gateway to hell itself? 5th story. A man in a costume is pretending to be my mom's dog. I haven't heard from my mom in about 3 days. That was around the time her Beagle Buster died, and she was really depressed, so I decided to give her some space to cope. So when she called me out of the blue yesterday, sounding all bright and chipper, that was when I knew something had happened. We live in small-town Iowa, a couple kilometers north of Spirit Lake. There isn't much to do to pass the time, and since my dad died and I moved out for college, Mom relied heavily on Buster for company. I finished up my last semester and went back home ready to fit back into life, at least until it was time to go job hunting, and that's when she told me the news about Buster. I tried my best to console her and even promised to get her a new dog, but she wouldn't hear a word of it. Buster was a gift from my dad for their 12th anniversary, so to her, Buster was the last thing that made sense to her, and losing him meant losing my dad all over again. I spent a few nights at her house to try and cheer her up before getting back to my own apartment, about 10 minutes away, until I got her phone call. The sun hadn't even risen properly above the horizon when I heard my phone rattling on a nightstand. Mikey, you need to get over here right now. You wouldn't believe who came to visit me last night. I had just woken up from a deep sleep, and her loud, energetic tone was a little overwhelming for me. I donned dash. Buster. He must have come in through the doggy door, although I don't know how because he's so big now. I paused for a minute, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. I looked at the phone screen to make sure it was my mom and glanced at the time to see it was just 5:05 a.m. Are you sure it isn't another beagle? Could be someone else's dog. Of course it's him. I know my Buster anywhere. Come over and say hi. I wanted to ask more, but between my sleepy haze and obvious confusion, all I managed was, Okay. I looked at my phone screen again, unsure if what just happened was a really vivid dream, or if my mom had fallen into some psychotic episode. I put on a sweater and slipped on my jeans and sneakers before leaving for her house. All the while, I was genuinely worried about her mental health and I blamed myself. Dad died around the same time. I started school out of state, and he was barely in the ground when I up and left Mom on her own. The more I thought about it, the more likely it seemed that I was the one to blame for all of this. And to make matters worse, I still didn't have a job. As I bent the corner, I half expected to see Buster running around our front lawn, as I had seen him before so many times walking home from high school. But there was no dog, probably inside. I walked up the cobblestone walkway and heard Mom making her ridiculous baby talk that I'd often hear when Buster was still alive. As I walked in through the front door, nothing could prepare me for what I saw as my eyes focused the room. I saw Mom sitting on the couch, as I had seen her 100 million times before, with a black mask curled at her feet. As my eyes adjusted to the light of the house, I stood frozen, unable to say anything. "Doesn't he look great, Mikey?" What I saw was a man, 6 feet 8 inches. He could have been closer to an even 7 feet tall from where I stood, wearing a matte black dog mask and full-body jumpsuit. The man was so tall he almost completely covered the white carpet Mom had laid out on the ground. I don't know where he was, but I'm so happy to have my big man back, Mom said as she pat the man's stomach. I still couldn't move or say anything. Through the eye holes of the mask, I could see the man studying me intently, and a pang of fear struck my chest. He looked as if he was plotting his next move, thinking of what to do. What did I just stumble upon exactly? I shifted my gaze to my mom and saw that she was in her glee. The only time I saw her this happy was when I told her I got accepted to Nebraska State. It felt so sincere and warm it tore me up inside. Then I looked back down to the man and looked at his eyes again through the holes of his mask. I could only see his eyes, but I swore they had the most smug look, as if to say, "Yeah, I made her this happy when you couldn't." But of course he didn't say anything. He was a dog after all. Dogs don't talk. My God, I had to say something. "Mom, what?" I blurted out. Of course, that's not exactly the words I wanted to come out, but the shock of the situation sort of chose my words for me. She raised her head and the warm, doting smile melted from her face. "What's your problem? Buster's back, can't you see?" "Mom, who is that? Where did he come from?" Mom looked back at me like I had a skull full of shit. "This isn't funny, Mikey. You're scaring Buster with your loud talking." My mom wasn't much of a prankster. Come to think of it, she wasn't much of anything. For as long as I could remember, she pretty much lived for her family. Whatever Dad and I liked, she liked as well. But I still held out hope that this was some elaborate joke at my expense. But her eyes and facial expression behind her comically tiny Looney Tunes glasses made me realize that something was terribly wrong. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I heard it. Whimpers coming from the thing that lay on the ground. "Oh, what's wrong, Bussy? Want to go out?" "You don't?" "Okay, well, stay inside with Mama." I could feel beads of sweat forming below my hairline in clusters. I didn't know what to do. Do I call the police? Clearly my mom was unwell if she felt this thing was her dead dog. Then, without warning, the man got up on all fours and started growling at me. I felt that pang of fear in my chest again, harder this time. I clearly couldn't count on my mom for help. So what was I going to do? The man in this suit looked like he had at least 50 pounds on me, and he was clearly deranged. "Buster, come back here. Leave Mikey alone. He just wants to play with you, Mikey. He hasn't seen you for so long." Then I could see him tensing up as if to charge. Before waiting, I ran out the open door and back onto the street, not stopping until I got home. As I type this now, it seems ridiculous me running from a grown man in a dog costume, but I don't know. There was something so unsettling about the incident. Clearly it was a man dressed as a dog, but I don't know. His eyes, while they were definitely human, had something else behind them that seemed inhuman and animalistic. I walked back over to my apartment, trying to make sense of what happened all the way. Who was that person? Where did he come from? Was he dangerous? But last and definitely not least, what do I do now? Do I go to the police? Tell them my mom's home has been invaded by a crazed dog man? Even if I did convince them to come to the home with me, what would they have done? I read a story online once where a man, out of some strange fetish, decided to live out the rest of his days as a horse in California with his wife, now owner. There wasn't anything the authorities could do about it. Even if the police did something, is that really what I wanted to put my mom through? Between Dad's death and my going away, she clearly had a lot of mental baggage, and a trip to the police station to file a report, assuming she would in the first place, was the last thing she needed. But still, leaving her in there with whatever that wasn't a solution either. I sat on my bed and thought for a while until I realized I had to do something. I walked back over to Mom's house. The front door is still open. Still unsure of how to approach the situation, I pulled out my pocket knife in case things took a turn for the worse. That's when I saw one of my old neighbors, Ms. Johansson, in her patio, looking in the direction of my house. I whistled her over to the sidewalk, careful not to make too much noise for my mom, or Buster, to notice. "Mikey, is your mom okay?" "Oh, why do you ask?" She studied me carefully. Well, she's been laughing and giggling really loud, and just before I saw you, she started cursing at someone. "I know she lives alone since you left, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe she had the TV on?" The thing is, it's not just that. Last night, I got up to use the washroom, and through the window, I saw a huge dog in your front lawn. It was about the size of a Great Dane. I thought about calling animal control, but who would believe an old coot like me? Who would believe that indeed, I thought to myself, "Thanks, Ms. Johansson. I think maybe you should call the police." Usually Ms. Johansson was the kind of old biddy to ask why, but she sensed the urgency of the situation and hurried inside to call the cops. No sooner had I turned back to face the house, I heard my mom scream. I hopped the wall of the house and walked inside to see the DOGMAN try to mount my mother as she fought back. I tried to focus on what was happening before my very eyes. His growls and snorts together with my mom's screams almost sent me crazy. My fear and shock quickly turned to rage when I folded out the blade from my pocket knife and threw myself at him at full speed. I crashed into him and took him down to the ground in a move reminiscent of my old Pop Warner days as I slipped the knife between his shoulder blades. I could hear him yelp in pain as I grabbed him and began punching the leather mask he was wearing. I heard his animalistic growls again as he lunged forward and bit my forearm. A bolt of pain ran up my right arm as I tried to pry his mouth open from a mask. "Mikey, what are you doing?" was all I could hear from behind me. This was strong. I felt him trying to pull me closer with one arm, but I fought back with everything until I heard the police sirens. The most human look of fear washed over his eyes as he opened his mouth and ran on all fours out the open back door and over the neighbor's fence. I was bleeding everywhere, and my mom wore a confused look on her face the entire time. When the police cleared the house and the neighborhood with no reports of a 7-foot-tall man, I wasn't particularly surprised. I deliberately left out the details of the dog's suit. I didn't need the police looking at me side-eyed. We made a report as usual, and investigators chalked it up to a homeless derelict who thought he could fit himself into Mom's home. It still didn't answer a lot of questions. For now, Mom is staying with me in my apartment. I have an appointment lined up with a psychiatrist for her the next morning. I love her so much, and I just want to do what's best for her. Why should I have done all along? I hope this whole episode is over. Reading it about a year from now, it might seem a little less terrifying and a little more funny, but the growling I hear ever so often outside my door as I write this doesn't help ease my mind. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.